How's it going, everybody? Welcome back for week 13 of Mon Hills Audio Hour. And this week, as we near the close of our little series here, this week's going to be kind of a review. This week we're going to be doing a rundown of a full mix. I've picked a song that I have here. We're just going to go through every piece of it, from the editing to the equalization, compression on everything, any time-based effects. I'm using my arrangement in the stereo field, my fader balancing, as well as any automation, which is kind of another topic that didn't fit neatly into any of the previous episodes, but I think will fit nicely here. Yeah, we're just gonna get straight into it. Here we go. All right, so here I have a mix. It's actually unreleased as yet, but I'm going to give you guys a super secret sneak preview. If you like what you hear, this full record is going to be out at midnight tonight, so be sure to go to your nearest streaming platform and listen to this right as it comes out. But here we've got drum set, electric bass, we've got a rhythm guitar part, a lead guitar part, lead vocal, couple harmonies on the lead vocal, little background vocal part, and a little horn part, and then we've got our time-based effects over here. So, flipping to my edit window here. All of these channels, or all of these clips rather, I've trimmed any dead space. I've faded all of my boundaries. Everything has been phase aligned with itself. Anything that had multiple perspectives, like the kick or the snare, the overheads, the snare relative to the overheads, the guitars especially, harmony parts, horn parts, everything's been phase aligned. Any timing issues in the performances, like here, have been dealt with and fixed. Same deal here, just isolating notes that might have fallen out of time in a particular performance relative to the rest of the performance, and just moving them so that they all align with each other. So this is a fully edited collection of clips here. Moving into the processing. Well, first, I should probably just let you hear the thing. I'll start you at the first chorus.
But we had to lose the war to win, had to let the rain come in, let the wolves roam free at night. Someone has to fight the fight. Why did it have to be you and me? Why wasn't it her or them? Maybe we were the only ones who said we would try again. I guess we were the fools who cheated love. It was you and I against the world.
All right. So yeah, just to give you a sense, a little bit of a rock thing, kind of a, not quite a ballady sort of thing, but it builds, it grows. So let's talk about what we're doing. Over here in drum world, we have kick with 2 mic perspectives, snare with 2 mic perspectives, hi-hat, rack tom, floor tom, stereo overheads, stereo room mics. And then all of that is being bussed to this channel here. And they're also being bussed in parallel to this channel, which has a really aggressive compressor on it and a really spacious flange on it. We're discussing those a couple weeks ago. As far as the drum bus itself goes, I've got a little bit of a shelving EQ, just to control like the end model of the frequency spectrum across the drums, and the VCA compression. And that's in addition to, I've got this this little bit of carving done to the parallel compressed drum channel as well. I've got the kicks gated independently on their microphones, and then that's coming to this channel. A little bit more gating overall, boosting low end, cutting low mids and mids, boosting a little bit of the top, just so it can cut through all those guitars. A little bit of extra EQ here, just reinforcing, and then ending with a compression stage, just to kind of smooth out the curves that I put across it. Snare, pretty minimal EQ. Really just using this for the gating up front and doing most of my EQ on this next stage. Again, not a lot though. A little bit of an optical compression, just a bit. And in this case, I'm just busing both of these mic perspectives to this one mono channel. Same thing that I'm doing to this kick, except then this kick gets bussed in tandem with the bass over here. If we want to look at what that's doing, so the bass is, here's the EQ curve, just a tiny bit of compression also, but we're filtering out up to 33 hertz and down to about 9 kilohertz. Boosting the same low shelf as the kick, so they kind of blend in the sub range, creating a little space for where that the kick body is, cutting here at like 250, giving this a little boost here in the low mids, like 600, and then I'm rolling this off, letting the kick kind of dominate that snap frequencies up at the top. So I'm just shelving down from 4.8 kilohertz on the bass, and then the bass and the kick both come to this bus, which we've got some shelving EQ, just to keep the low end tamed and dial in a little bit more of a precise high end. And we've got this this optical LA3A emulation here. Really, that's just kind of smooths out the kick relative to the bass. It allows them to maintain a more consistent level relative to each other. It's a pretty slow attack and release, so it's just kind of a gentle, creamy sort of smoothing effect that has. It's not really acting on the transient of the kick so much as it is like blending the sustain of the kick with that of the bass. So that's what's happening over here. Very little. I mean, it's a hi-hat. Now we're over here on the hi-hat EQ, just cutting everything, all this nonsense that you don't need out of a hi-hat. And then I'm actually shelving down a little bit from 12 kilohertz, just because this particular hi-hat was kind of overly sparkly, overly abrasive in the top end. Tom's processed sort of the same way, EQ'd slightly differently, but here, let me put these up side by side. So giving the rack tom a little bit of that airspace, and I'm getting that out of the floor tom. Filtering them essentially the same way, although I'm taking a little bit more air out of the floor tom. I'm doing a little bit of channel compression here on both of these, like 3.5 ratio, pretty fast attack and a relatively slow release. Some gating, very important on toms. Cutting the same range here in the mid range here, 800 for the rack tom and 700 for the floor tom. Just keeps that from getting too boxy or pingy, getting in the way of like overlapping with guitars or something like that. Cutting here in the lower mids too, like 350 for the rack and around 250 for the floor. Just keeping, that's kind of that lingering rumbling sound that toms tend to have. So just taming that, and then we are doing a little shelving boost here on both of them from 135 down to the high pass at 90, just so they maintain their weight, their force when they're used. And then optical compression on both of these as well, LA 2A. Again, that's allowing. I'm taming the attack with the channel compression using this fast attack setting. So this is more just to bring the sustain, make the sustain more level and consistent, so I can bring this entire channel up more, and it kind of stays in place. Because the thing with toms is they're always, well, not always, but more often than not, the vast majority of the time, they are momentary. They're instantaneous, and then they're gone, just for drum fills. So you kind of just want to be able to like set them and forget them as far as your fader balance goes. And then over here on our overheads, kind of the same deal as the hat, although I am leaving a little bit more of the low mid frequencies in, just to kind of capture the tops of some of the harmonics of the snare and toms, and I'm shelving up here at 12,000 hertz to introduce some of that air into the full drum sound. Carving up this room mic pretty well, leaving a little bit of this low frequency, but carved here in the low mids, so that again this catches a little bit of the kick drum and a lot of the toms. Just kind of keeps it from sounding too closely mic'd. We're also letting the overheads do all the work in the top end and not really worrying about too much of that contribution from this room mic in particular. We look at our fader balance here. Kick is a unity. Of course, with the actual contributions to that bus not being at unity, biasing the inside mic relative to the outside head mic, slightly biasing the snare top relative to the snare bottom. Pretty small amount of the overall, pretty small amount of the hi-hat close mic. That's generally how that goes, because you kind of can take most of that from your overheads. And I'm keeping the overheads pretty small too in this case, just because of the nature of this track, plus the drummer played fairly hard on this take, so the size is kind of there without me having to push the faders up too high. Yeah, so moving on, we talked about the bass. Now with the guitars, what I've done is I've got a mic and a DI on both the rhythm part and the lead part. So both of those bus to their own bus channels. In the case of the rhythm guitar, it's coming to a stereo bus, and in the case of the lead guitar, it's coming to a mono bus, because I want the lead to stay preserved in the center, and I want the rhythm part to kind of just live on the sides so that there's still space for my vocal and kick, snare, bass. Just keeping the mono elements nice and distinct up the center. But then both the solo and rhythm channels are coming to these overall this overall guitar bus, which has some shelving on it and a little bit of VCA compression, just a smidge. And then similar to the drums, that bus also routes to this channel, which is a chorus, which, if we remember, that's something I'm using to keep the guitars kind of hazy and out of focus relative to the clarity of other things, which allows me to keep the actual relative volume of the guitar up in the mix without it being perceived as as close or as far forward to the listener as the elements that I want to prioritize, like my lead vocal or my bass or things like that. So just to give you a sense here, here's what those sound like. And you might notice the faders moving. We're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about that at the end of this episode. It's a process called automation, which is, for me, that's usually the final stage of a mix. We'll talk about why that is. But just to keep going with our guitars here. So this is the rhythm guitar EQ. I'll go ahead and throw this up. This is pretty much the bulk of the processing on the guitars, with the exception of the bus. Taking a lot of the low end out, leaving a little bit more in the rhythm guitar than I am in the lead guitar. Really passive channel compression on both, because these are electric guitars, and like we talked about, electric guitars typically don't require a lot of compression in the mix stage, because, I mean, by nature of coming through a guitar amplifier is effectively just a big compressor. So typically there's not a lot of dynamic range in an electric guitar anyway, so you kind of don't need to stack a bunch of compressors doing a lot of aggressive gain reduction. So it's really just this 1.8 to 1 ratio, and then this 2 to 1 ratio on the bus, which is really more just to make the guitars sit together and act together, as opposed to dealing with any extraneous dynamic information. As far as the rest of the EQ goes, taking some of this top end away on both of them, just to leave that space open for cymbals and vocals and things like that. Rolling off some of the top end here on the shelf from a little above, between 5 and 6K, keeps this out of the way, again, of the vocals. I also find that it spatially, like, places guitars more in where you would expect them to be, in the front to back, or I guess closeness versus distance field of the listening environment. You kind of expect guitars to be further back into the sides, and I find that shelving down in this range tends to help me achieve that. The only time where that wouldn't be something I would do is if the guitar tone was extremely dull and dark, but it wasn't in this case. These are actually fairly bright, so I was able to pull that out without too much trouble. I am giving this both of these a boost here at 800. That is kind of the designated area that I've left open in the frequency spectrum. I've kind of cut that range in most other places so that I can let the guitars live there. Cutting pretty aggressively here in the low mids, here at 600 hertz, just to keep these out of, from stacking up, because everything has 600 hertz and that range in it. Shelving down a little bit on the lows and low mids here on the rhythm guitar, but I'm shelving up a little bit on the lead guitar because with the rhythm guitar playing chords, it tends to get muddy. Just that's a tendency of guitars, and especially in a case like this where you got a bass and plenty of other elements competing for space. Bass needs that frequency more than guitar needs it. With the case of the lead, it's playing single notes, and they're typically higher. So this helps, like shelving up just a little bit, helps it keep some of its body. Plus, it's not, it's not taking up space that like the bottom of the lead vocal could be in, because they're really not going to be happening at the same time. Again, it's sort of a similar consideration to the toms, where this is only going to be like an interjecting part that is temporarily in. It's not like the rhythm guitar where it's in the whole time. One other interesting thing to note is on these DI channels, I'm using an amp simulator here to just kind of shape the tone. It gave me an option to shape the tone in addition to the amplifier sound. So just to kind of give you a sense here. So here's just the amp sound, like the actual amplifier that was mic'd. So, I mean, not bad, but you can see I'm not using a ton of it, because as the song shaped up around it, I found that I just wanted to use that to like add some texture, and then I could use this to kind of more precisely tailor the sound, because here's what this started out as. This is just straight out of the electric guitar into a DI box, not into an amplifier. Simulator to it. And then if I added in the amp microphone, so you can hear I'm getting the attack from like the first part of that amp mic, and then I'm letting the actual tone from the simulator fill it in. Same principle here on the solo, except the fader balance is kind of flipped. So in that case, I'm using the sim to like add some dirt, because it's a fairly clean amp setting on the mic, but I wanted to drive it a little bit just so it stays distinct. So I'm using the amp sim to kind of add some overdrive to it. Moving on to vocals. We'll start with the lead. I've got the lead vocal and it's being bused to this mono bus where the processing is happening. We also have a lead doubling that happens in a few spots in the lyrics, so that's also coming to the same bus because it's just another track of the melody. I've also got this lead vocal sending in parallel to another mono bus channel where I've actually got an octave pedal on it, which is, we talked about this in the lead vocal episode. It's a trick I like to use. And this is also busing back to the overall lead vocal bus. Just goes back in through the same processing, so it sort of gets treated as just another portion of the vocal's frequency spectrum, but it's adding low frequencies that wouldn't have been in the vocal, which to me allows me to tailor the low end of the total vocal a little bit more. Like I can cut it a little bit more aggressively to allow for space without the vocal sounding thin or losing body. So, like, just to give you a sense of that. So you can hear it pretty prominently. It kind of hides when everything else is going on. But if I were to cycle it, here, let me throw it in a verse. It'll be easier to hear the effect.
And I against the world, no one else.
It's a subtle effect. It's a subtle effect, but you can feel it more than you can hear it. Like if I start with it off.
And I against the world, no one else. And she came in and took that world, turned it.
It just makes it feel thicker, makes it feel more supported. So, into our actual chain here, starting with a VC8 compression with a slow attack and a fast release, low ratio, just smoothing out, leveling everything off so that I can EQ in a more general way across the what I'm hoping to create a mostly flat vocal frequency spectrum. High passing up to 150 and low passing down to 17 kilohertz. And then here I'm shelving up from 300 just to maintain some of that body. That's a common move for me when doing female vocals, just to maintain, like I said, the body, the thickness of it. Slight roll off here at 2K. That's that like mid-range telephony kind of sound. Same deal here at 3K. This particular vocalist just has a lot of harmonics in that range. And then shelving up here at 5 kilohertz. Because if we remember, I've been cutting that range in a lot of our other inputs so far, leaving space intentionally for me to place the vocal clarity right there. Just to give you a sense here.
And I against the world, no one else. And she came in and took that world, turned it into.
So you can hear it just like, it sounds kind of dull by itself without any equalization. And then it just kind of brightens up and sits where it's supposed to with the introduction of that. Also, another compression stage, a little bit of a higher ratio, now we're up to 3, a little bit of a slower release, so we're getting a little bit more aggressive with it now that we've tailored the frequency spectrum. One more compression stage, one more like traditional, discrete, full range compression stage with a FET compressor. This looks aggressive, like with a 12-to-1 ratio, but it's really, this is more for the color than for the dynamic control.
And I against the world, no one else. Then she came in and took that world, turned it into hell. We had magic, not.
And then multiband. Actually getting a little aggressive with it in this particular case, but it was called for in the context of the song. I'll show you what I mean.
You and I against the world, no one else. Then she came in and took that world, turned it into hell.
So what I'm doing here is I'm compressing four of these bands, independently. I've got a low frequency, everything below 250, low mids, everything between 250 and 2.1K, high mids, everything between 2.1 and 6K, and then highs, everything above 6K. And I can just kind of change their relative level to each other.
You and I against the world, no one else. Then she came in and took that world, turned it into.
That to me just lets it breathe. Keeps it from sounding too stock. Like it becomes a more fluid, living thing, because this can work in response to active areas of the frequency spectrum in real time, rather than just acting on whatever the loudest part of the frequency spectrum is, like most compression stages. Plus, then using the makeup gain, like I said, I can set relative levels of frequency ranges of the entire vocal, which is handy for lead vocals. And then for these harmony parts, I pretty much did same processing, just in stereo this time, so that these could be on the sides. And then I did do like an extra EQ stage. Like these are pretty much the same EQ on both of these channels. It's just two different parts. Getting rid of the body so that it doesn't compete. This entire EQ curve is just so it doesn't compete with the lead vocal. I wanted it to have like the same tone, which is why I copied the bus processing, but then high passing up to 300, shelving down from 8K, notching here at 4.2 kilohertz, and cutting again here at 850, just to keep it out of the way of the instruments. I'll show you what I mean here. Let me find a section here.
Or to win, had to let the rain come in, let the wolves
So you hear
roam
that's
free at night. Someone has to fight the fight. Why
hear
did
that
it?
overlap, especially in the lower end.
Or to win, had to let the rain come in.
And then when that EQ comes on, that lead vocal all of a sudden becomes more intelligible. Those words start jumping out more relative to it. Moving on to this little harmony, this little background vocal section. These oohs here.
Or to win, had to let the rain come.
Nothing crazy going on here. Just keeping it out of the way. So I'll play this in context.
Or to win, had to let the rain come in, let the wolves roam free at night. Someone.
So a little bit of channel compression, filtering up to 180 and down to 15. A little bit of a low end boost, just because this part had a tendency to lean towards breathy. So just adding a little bit more weight, cutting 1 kilohertz because there was just a lot of overtone density there. And again, like this isn't a part that needs to be occupying that space. That's much better occupied by guitars or snare drums. Just keeping that out of the way. same deal at 3 kilohertz, just keeping it out of the way in the mid-range. And giving it a little bit of air here, shelving up from 6K. This moves into LA2A optical compressor. This is fairly aggressive here, just to kind of keep this in check level-wise across its playback, especially because it's a relatively short part. It's only in for 1.5 choruses. This is also more just to add color as well. Just a nice warmth that it brings. And then a doubler, doing a little bit of pitch modulation, some stereo effects here, and some slight quick delays. Just lends the effect that it's more than just 4 voices. And there's this quick, brief little horn, unison with the melody. So we've got a tenor, a trombone, a trumpet, and an octave of the trumpet, each of them double-tracked and panned slightly inside each other, with the octave trumpet being hard left and right, and these being slightly within that as they go, with the tenor being the furthest in towards the center. So right up front, pretty aggressive VCA compression, 6:1 ratio. Moving straight into this EQ, adding a little bit of bottom end, but only up to, I'm high passing up to 200, so between 200 and 350, I'm shelving up, just to maintain that weight, keeps it from getting too nasally. Or I guess keeps it from only sounding nasally. Low passing down to 15, just to keep the extreme high end that can be present in especially trumpets from getting too much in the way of any of that kind of esoteric information that's happening up there. That said, I am shelving up from 10K up to my low pass, just to keep this nice and bright. Like when this part enters, I wanted it to be really like sparkly and kind of create the effect that the clouds are opening up, which in the context of the song kind of makes sense. I'll let you hear more of a song so you get a sense of why that makes sense with the song. And then we're fairly aggressively cutting here in the low mid at 400 hertz, and then again at 1,000 hertz, just to keep this from interfering with any of the mid-range instruments that are more important. Same deal with those background vocals, just to make it sound like a bigger horn section, more than 8 horns.
Next to me, and even though the skies fell from above, thank God.
Quick note on my panning considerations here. So kick and bass and snare are all in mono. Hat, I usually pan, like I kick it off to the right slightly. The toms, I tend to pan opposite each other, kind of in the middle sides, just so that way, like if there's a fill where it's rolling from rack to floor, that effect it translates in the stereo field. And that's, I guess this panning would be called listener perspective, because like this is if you're facing the kit, not as if you're behind the kit, where in this case these would be opposite. Actually, no, I guess I'm wrong. The hat, so I guess I kind of do this weird, and I never really noticed it until just now. Hat is panned listener perspective, but then the toms are panned drummer's perspective. No real rhyme or reason for that, I guess. Like I said, I never really realized it. That's just kind of how I've gotten into hearing things, and just how I've liked to do it. And I don't really need more justification than that. Overheads and room. Overheads are hard left and right. Room is reversed to kind of simulate a 360 stereo image of the drums. Guitars, rhythm guitar is split 60% left and right. Solo or lead guitar is up the center. Lead vocals up the center. These on lyric harmony parts are 80% left and right. These backup vocals are hard left and right, and then like I said with these horns, they are the high trumpet is hard left and right, and then this one's slightly inside of that, which is slightly inside the trombone, or rather the trombone is slightly inside of the middle octave trumpet, and then the tenor is slightly inside the trombone. Okay, moving to... real quick before we move on to effects returns, notice that none of my faders are higher than unity. I do that intentionally, just to prevent anything from getting too unruly as it's all summed together. I won't, if I need to go above unity on something, then I usually turn everything else down around it. So everything is subtractively fader balanced down from zero rather than balanced up from negative infinity. Moving on to my effects returns, which are all hard pan left and right, except for this sub generator that I've got my kick, bass, and toms running through. Just makes those punch a little harder. But I'm being really careful with it. Like I'm high passing before it gets there. Then I'm generating these harmonics, these sub-harmonics at a particular frequency, in this case 66 hertz, which is the key of this song. So it's just like the lowest octave of the key of this song. And then I'm high passing again afterwards, just to keep it from getting too adding any distortion to my low end, which would become apparent in mastering, which we'll talk about on the next episode. But I'm using that as a parallel effect, not a time-based effect, but I just group it with it because that's where I kind of keep my parallel effects here at the right side of my session. Room reverb that I've got pretty much all my sources except for my kick and bass coming to in varying degrees. 1.8 second decay in a medium-sized room. Low pass down to 15 kilohertz and shelving down from 3.6 kilohertz. And then I'm also high passing up to 360 and cutting out 1250. Just kind of blends everything together. Slap delay, which is predominantly for the lead vocal, but also the guitars are coming to this as well. Subtle effect, just adding a little clarity, a little a little attitude to these sources here, these guitars and the vocals. Stays parked at 104 milliseconds, 0 feedback, and also low passing down to 2.1 kilohertz and high passing up to 300, so that I just keep the mid-range frequencies that I want in that delay. Long reverb, which is pretty much just for my lead vocal, and then I'm also washing out my snare in that as well. And then also the horns and background vocals in the solo. In this case, we're using a small hall, 2.7 seconds of decay, shelving down from 3 kilohertz up to a 15 kilohertz low pass, and probably the same, more or less the same EQ afterwards, except I'm notching it 1500. Still high passing up to 360. So that's where a lot of this, the spaciousness in the song is really coming from that. But I'm only applying it to elements that need to interact with that space, which isn't all of them. But when it's applied in this way, it doesn't sound unnatural. If anything, it just makes the sources that it is applied to sound more natural in the context of the elements around them, and allows them to maintain a space of their own without sounding incohesive. And then tempo delay, just parked at 1/8 note subdivision. No feedback in this case. It didn't really work for this song to have like a long delay tail. EQ'd the same way as the slap delay, by the way. You might not be able to hear it in the context. It's I've got it mixed pretty low, but it's really just to create kind of like a swirling effect, because again, then I'm washing those tails out through my reverb, my long reverb as well, just to kind of make it swirl and sound interesting, but like in an imperceptible sort of way. Moving over to master bus here, we've got VCA compression, really slow attack, medium, well, slow release, but medium in the context of bus compression, light ratio. Just makes everything sound like it's working together. Moving on to a multi-band on the master bus. Really light stuff here. Similar principle to the vocal, except over the course of the whole thing. Big thing that's doing is keeping that low mid-range in check, because we've just got a lot of instrumental sources here that are occupying that space and would otherwise suck up the available dynamic range before our low frequencies or our high frequencies. So this is just kind of keeping that level off and giving the extreme ends of the spectrum a chance to compete. Little harmonic generator here, little tape simulation. adding some color and aiding in stereo separation. EQ here. So just really tailoring the overall summation of my high mids, and also just making sure that my low end is just kind of addressed before this all gets summed and goes to mastering. Again, recognizing that I more than likely don't have the most accurate representation of the low end on the equipment at my disposal. So just kind of a fail-safe to kind of give that some space. It's easier in mastering to make low end sound more present than less present. It's a more transparent thing to achieve the addition of low end rather than the subtraction of low end without it affecting things around it. I've found anyway in the mastering process. So yeah, just adding this little low shelf reduction here, which you in this case probably won't even hear if I cycle it. Depending on your system, you might feel it. You probably won't hear it audibly. And then just a little bit of a high frequency accentuation. And if we look at everything in summation, go to meters here. So generally flat trend line here, a little bit of a dip here, which in this instance I might go back, I might go back to my EQ, and if we're at 5 kilohertz where that's fallen off, I might add a little bit more here, or I might shelve a little bit more here, or better yet, I might go to my mix and say, well, maybe that's some space I can give to the horns, so maybe I'll roll my frequency on my shelving boost lower a little bit. Maybe I'll let them take that space, or I'll let background vocals are kind of already occupying that space. So maybe I'll give it to the horns, or maybe I'll give even more to the vocal. So that's the thing you can consider as you are checking your meter across the summation. I'm not going to make that decision right now. So there's the process of everything. There's still one more stage, like I said. So in order, after everything's been recorded, get your files in, build the basic channels of the session, edit, and every process within editing, trim, time align, phase align, tune, and then you start processing, get a general fader balance, general panning, equalize, compress, any additional special effects you might need on a particular source, get your time-based effects up, create your parallel mixes for those. Obviously constantly tweaking as needed as things shape up. And then, after all of that's done and you're satisfied with the state of things in general, you can start getting more specific, and you can start making your mix react to the song in a more active way, using a process called automation, which basically just means any of these parameters available, whether it's within plugins, whether it's the panning or the mutes or the faders, whatever it may be, pretty much any of the parameters available to you are automatable, meaning you can program them to change in real time as a song is played back. The most common use of this is fader automation. If I play just from anywhere in this song, really.
War to win, how to let the rain come in, let the wolves roam free at night. Someone has to fight the fight. Why did it have to be you and me? Why wasn't it her or them? Maybe we were the only ones who said we would try again. I guess we were the fools who cheated love.
So these are just moves of the fader, responding to needs for level change across the playback of an entire song. Now, for me, predominantly, when I'm talking about fader automation, I'm trying to achieve an instrumental mix that doesn't require it. So like from my rhythm section, my drums, bass, guitars, this doesn't have keyboards, but if it had keyboards, those sorts of things aren't elements that I typically think of as requiring automation. I want to get those mixed in such a way that they sit and live and play back and can stay at a good balance with each other. But lead parts like lead vocals and solos and auxiliary parts like backup vocals, horns, if there were strings, and most specifically delays will be automated to respond to the conditions of the instrumental. In the case of vocals and solos, it's just so that they can keep their head above water on the instrumental. But that might be, the level of the water in the chorus is going to be a lot different than the level of the water in the verse. So, you can see, in the case of this lead vocal, the automation is here. I've done it on this VCA so that I can still retain independence of this fader, my vocal channel fader. But you can see in this little faint blue line that's read out. Also done an overall return fader automation on this VCA as well, just for this quiet chorus here, like so it all gets sucked out.
Thank God we were the fools who cheated love.
So it's those sorts of considerations that you're making. Like it needs to be more dry here because elements are dropped out. So I want to pull my time-based effects away so everything sounds closer to me. Like the few elements that are still there need to sound closer to me. So I'm going to, automate this to where all my effects returns drop at that point. I'm going to ride the fader of the horns so that as the horns play back, they are as present as they can be without getting in the way of things like the lead vocal. Same consideration with the backup vocals and these counter harmonies. Lead vocal in the solo, just making sure that it stays audible, things like that. And in the case of this song, that's really all the automation that I've done is just little fader automation on those parts. But there are plugins that you might want to turn on and off. There might be an EQ effect that you want to automate the bands of the EQ to move for a specific thing. Those are all options that you have. The reason that I save this to be last in the mix is, one, as you automate a fader, or at least in Pro Tools, that fader is at that point exclusively automated, so you can't change overall fader balance anymore, so you want to make sure that that's done. And if you're doing plugin automation, you want to make sure that you're manipulating a finished sound rather than a sound that's going to change later, because that might inform the way that you automate that plugin. Mute automation is a thing that happens sometimes, although I find that I'm becoming more inclined to, if it's audio, like if it's an audio source, I'm just going to cut the clip where I don't want it, but mute effects might sometimes be used for effects returns, like time-based effects. Like if I specifically want this reverb to outright disappear, I'll use a mute automation. But I very seldom am I doing that. I also don't. I try to keep it to where my reverbs and my slap delay don't require automation. There are times that the long reverb I will automate for certain reasons, but in general I try to keep, since those are creating like your perceived space, it could be disorienting to change that, really, unless you're trying to achieve an effect of disorientation. My delay, though, that's something that I'm constantly automating. That's kind of got the most automation of anything. Just tracing this line.
You felt helpless.
So you don't want much of it here in this verse, but then as it gets into the chorus, you're gonna want a little more.
But we had to lose the war to win. Had to let the rain come in.
Let it start swirling a little bit more. And then you can do throws here like this, where
It was you and I against the world, no one else. And she came in and took.
So in the case of this song, there's no extreme throws like there could be in some other types of music, but those are considerations that you can make. And to me, that's like kind of the fun part, like at the end of mixing, is to think about like, are there any words like or vocal phrases that I just want to hang on after they end, or can I make this keep like continuously swirling, keep the energy moving forward, even if there isn't like a vocal actively being sung? Like, can I still include some reference of it? And that's kind of how I approach delays. So that's kind of everything that you are considering in an entire mix. I know this has been really fast, a quick review of lots of things. Hopefully they are, by this point, familiar things. Thanks for sticking with it for this long. I hope it's been helpful. Next week, or I guess not next week, but the week after next, there will be one more episode where I'm going to ever so slightly scratch the surface of mastering. That is a big topic. That could be a whole series unto itself. I'm going to talk about some of the basic considerations so that if you find yourself in a position that you might want or need to do a little bit of a master for your own mix, some of the ways that you can achieve that, and some of the like distinct ways of thinking, because mastering is a distinct process from mixing. But yeah, I hope this has been helpful and illuminating and worthwhile. Good luck in the meantime, and I will see you in 2 weeks at this time for week 14, talking about mastering. See you then.